Sounds like football, baby.
What up, people? Welcome into the Fantasy Football Smackdown. It is Monday if you're watching us on the YouTube. June 21st. I'm your host, Kyle August. You can follow me on Twitter at KyleMonth8. And joining me, the co-host of the Smackdown. You know him as Jake Takes FF on Twitter. I know him as the excellence of execution. It's Jake. Rip your heart out. Jake, rip.
You know, I love hearing it from the studio audience every once in a while. It's nice being on that end of the applause. But how are you doing, my friend? It's been exactly a week. Yes, it has. It's been good, man. Yeah, I mean, just been busy, waiting for football season pretty much. I can't ever get away. Gotten a draft this week where so this is my buddy. He's the listener of the show. John, he's in a league with us, the RSO league that we talked about a few weeks ago. He is a junkie, like most of you out there, and he decided he wanted to do a draft. We were doing it redraft league, but he added a twist so let me know your thoughts on this. I don't know if you put it in that league chat or not. It's a redraft league. It's super flex, 3 flex positions on top of that. So it's pretty deep starting roster, like six or 7 bench spots. But the caveat to this league is that every week, if you have a bench player that outscores someone in your starting lineup, you have to cut that player off your bench. Oh, that's incredible. Man, how do you guys, was that your idea?
No, this one was his. And I was like, dude, that sounds awesome. Like it definitely, it's interesting to me for sure. But I was like, as a commissioner, that sounds like a pain in the ass because
huge pain in the ass. Are you the commissioner in that league?
I am sure as hell not, but I paid him the $10 to be part of the experiment. That's for damn sure. So
I'll be honest with you, man. I love it. Like any new twist that you see nowadays in fantasy football leagues, I'm all about it. It started out when you're playing. It's just, all is redraft, one redraft league after one redraft league when you're just, you get into it and you're doing family leagues, and then dynasty comes on you. And then, just a couple weeks ago, I got I dipped my toe into auction. Now you're throwing this at me. What's that other league that you play in, the roulette league?
The roulette league. Yeah, that one's a dynasty league where every year you pretty much spin a wheel and any of the 4 positions get killed off. So everybody in that position from every roster gets dumped into the player pool for the draft. So yeah, I did 2 of those last year. Probably going to do 1 more here. I'm going to try to squeeze that startup in before redraft season really, really kicks off. But yeah, but man, it's hilarious because I'm in this league and I'm like, okay, and I'm thinking through it and we kind of put it together and it's $10. We filled it quick. We know all these crazy people out there, so they wanted to draft and we got it rolling. And then for some reason in my head, I flipped it. That it was like, if the player in your lineup is outscored by somebody on your bench, you have to cut the starter. And so
you end up having to cut everybody.
So yeah, I screwed that up because and it's still fine. Like my approach, I don't hate it, but like I was like, I'm going to take 2 quarterbacks in my tight end first. And I'm not going to roster any quarterbacks or tight ends because that way I don't have to cut. I won't have to worry about cutting anyone, which is still the case, except that it's not as beneficial, I guess. Like, because it's like, oh, you just cut the bench guy. Like, whatever. Like, I could live with cutting, Jameis Winston or Baker Mayfield as my QB3. Like, who I guess that not a big deal. But so I probably took a different approach than I would have if I actually paid attention to the rules. But so far, so good. We're like 6 rounds in. I didn't get Juju Smith-Schuster, so I told him that the league was null and void, but they're still drafting, so that's okay.
in retrospect, though, if you went into this and you knew what you were doing and you had read the rules, how would you approach the draft any differently? Like, I just don't know how you would, because you can't really prepare for, I don't know, unless you're just avoiding like these hit or miss type fringe players, like those scary type, you put them in your lineup and they might do good or they might not. I mean, I don't know. Is there any specific way you're approaching that?
Yeah. When originally my thought process was like, well, if these guys could are in danger of getting cut, if someone on my bench outscores them, I will just remove pretty much that factor by only rostering 2 quarterbacks and tight end, thinking that like all the other positions, no matter what I do, I'm going to roster a lot of running backs and wide receivers. So like They're like, what happens if, Joe Mixon goes out there and tweaks his foot in week 2 and scores 0.6 points, like, and I'm cutting Joe Mixon because somebody on my bench, fell forward for 10 yards, right? So
is there a caveat to injuries? Because that seems like you could get that seems like you can get screwed real quick right there.
So it would be more. I think you would need that if the starter was the player getting cut, but since it's the bench player, the only difficult thing is as I'm like going through this, I'm like, I'm not drafting Tony Pollard because I'll be able to get that guy in the free off of Fab because no one's going to play him and he's going to pop and then he's going to end up in the pool for ad drops, right?
That's the scary thing is rostering someone like Tony Pollard who does have that potential. Like he doesn't need a Zeke injury. He can be involved on day one and have just as much of a workload. And then, I'll tell you what, in that league, there's going to be some serious drama in week 1. I bet you see some crazy names end up getting cut.
It's definitely interesting. Like I said, it was my own fault. It was very clear. I had it in my mind that it was even more chaotic that the starter would get axed. So I was like, oh, I found this loophole that you can't get killed. You can't, I can't get forced to drop this guy if I don't have any competition for him. So, I mean, it still kind of works, but
sneaky. Did you end up with anyone you like on that roster? Your head?
I'm like 7 or 8 rounds deep. I started Dak and Russell Wilson. And then I ended up getting Dak and Amari Cooper stack. So I felt pretty good about that. I took Hawkinson, which is we're going to be talking about tight ends on today's show. I buried the hell out of that lead 6 minutes in. We're going to be talking tight end strategy for redraft here. So I got Dak and Wilson, Amari Cooper, Hawkinson, not in all that order. Najee Harris as my anchor running back in a full PPR. And then I've just been pounding wide receivers. I took Cooper Kupp, T. Higgins, who I will own in almost as many leagues as I own Juju Smith-Schuster this year, I think.
Yeah, you know what? I meant to tag you on Twitter. I saw some sort of report. I can't remember who it was from. Someone in the coaching staff, I think, said something along the lines, or actually it might have been even straight from Joe Burrow saying
I think it was
how T. Higgins is bigger, more explosive this season. He just all in all looks better. Like, oh, that's the kind of stuff. I knew Kyle August was loving that.
Dude, any Higgins or Ayuk hype at this point in my life, I don't know if I could handle it anymore. Like, I own those guys. Every roster that I have, I'm trying to get these guys on. In Dynasty, I've added them in startups this year, and in redraft, I think that value where they're going to end up in round 5-ish, even 4, like I'm good with that, but I think round 5 is going to be the sweet spot for those guys. I think the industry is pretty high on Higgins because of the volume. I'm not sure that everyone's a believer in Ayuk, but do
you think he's the wide receiver 1 in that offense?
I think he is, but I'm also not I like Deebo Samuel, but he's more just like he's a football guy. He's like a NFL guy. Like he's a great player to have on their team, and he does a lot of good things. But from a fantasy perspective, it's like, it's just not. Anytime like they go, oh, we're gonna manufacture touches for him. Like, well, why isn't he good enough to just that you can just involve him? Like
to see if the whole Trey Lance thing, assuming Trey Lance starts, how that dynamic ends up changing how targets are distributed in San Francisco. Like I was going through our tight end rankings here before the show, and someone like George Kittle, it's like, we just automatically plug him in second after Travis Kelce, but it's like, oh, I mean, I was going to say maybe he had like a bromance with Jimmy Garoppolo, but he definitely had a bromance with Jimmy Garoppolo, and he was not shy about it. It's all over social media.
Yeah.
But beyond George Kittle, I'm curious how things would roll with Trey Lance and how targets are distributed. I actually had a little bit of not FOMO. What do you call it when you already made the mistake? And I took
fear. Just straight fear.
Regret. I took just fear of regret. I took Trey Lance second overall in a dynasty rookie draft. Super flex. Obviously, Lawrence went first, but I keep seeing all this stuff about Justin Fields, man, and how he looks good, and Andy Dalton's mentoring him. Not that Andy Dalton's this super stud elite quarterback, but just everything. Like I've seen just nothing bad coming from Justin Fields' camp right now. I'm curious. Do you think I made a mistake?
No, I would.
You're 100% Trey Lance over Justin Fields? Okay.
Yes. Like I think if you put them both, apparently, if you put them in a vacuum cleaner, I think they both have, They both have talent and traits that you want from a fantasy perspective. But at the end of the day, when you look, and you could point to draft capital too now if you want as well. Lance went second overall. But for me, what it boils down to is Kyle Shanahan versus the bag of rocks running the Chicago Bears at the moment. Like there's no chance I'm putting my money in that basket. Like for me, Fields is the 103. Like I feel I'd even take him over Pitts, which I know he's obviously like on freaking fire right now. But like I think Fields he's going to be solid, and he's got Allen Robinson. It's not totally inept, offense, but Lance is he's tied to Kyle Shanahan. Give me that every day. And maybe Fields has more upside over the course of like his career. Maybe he does end up being better, but I feel like it's the safer bet to go with Lance, and he still has as much upside as Fields. So
if anything, I feel like Lance could have more upside. And as far as like safety, I feel like I don't know, man. I really am torn. Like I feel off the top of my head, I want to say Fields seems like the safer pick. Like he was a better prospect in my eyes coming into the draft. Like I thought that should have been the pick for San Francisco. And then Trey Lance is touted as this like what is he, 20 years old coming into the league. He's not exactly seasoned. You know what I mean?
Right.
He's got a long way to go, a lot of shit to learn, and it seems like Justin Fields might already be there. That's all I'm saying. That's what scares me a little bit, but it's all, that's why I took him. It was all about situation and upside. He's got the rushing upside. He's got Kyle Shanahan. He's got a plethora of wide receivers and tight end that is fantastic. Everyone after the catch is incredible in that offense.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that'll be good stuff for Trey Lance. I don't know exactly how we got into quarterback talk.
I don't know.
Kind of went off the rails there, but shout out to my boy Trey Lance. I need you to do things for me in this dynasty league. I put a lot of draft stock in you, my friend.
There we go. And I know a lot. And I saw a couple leagues where I think only one that I was in, but I saw some other people post in like some chat groups I was in where Lance went at the 101, like over Lawrence, which that rushing is just such a key, man. And then it's just when you see these guys going off, and like we see the players that are going off the top of the board right now in redraft leagues at the quarterback position, they're all rushers. I mean, all of them, even though Dak and Russ don't run for a ton of yardage, they run for enough that keeps them in that category. They get touchdowns. And we're going to be breaking down our QB draft strategy a bit next week. So not to get too far into that, but yeah, man, it's definitely interesting. And this is the time of year where we're just bouncing around and there's not enough going on to keep our attention. So you kind of just start wandering down these paths. We're like, what is this? Or what about this guy? And that's pretty much how a lot of conversations are going these days.
For sure, man. It's that time of the year. It's speculation season.
So before we get too far along, I mentioned last week your shirt game was at an all-time high. So people got to be tuning into the YouTubes, but then you show up today with whatever this is. I don't know if we can continue. This might be our final podcast, but I guess is that your 101 in the redraft leagues this year? Are you propping him up that high, or?
He's not, but you know what? If you want to make the argument to me, you don't even have to argue. You can tell me you're taking Saquon 101, and I'm not going to flinch. I'll get behind that. CMC, I feel like is safe of a pick as he might seem. I mean, what is so stable about his situation that's not, the same with Saquon's situation? I mean, it's essentially an entirely new offense in Carolina. It's kind of the same in New York, and Saquon Barkley is this freak athlete. We saw what he did in his rookie season. And I think a lot of people just kind of forget about that. Yeah. It seems like there's a weird amount of concern about him coming back from this injury. But being in 2021 now with modern medicine and whatnot, I'm not so concerned. I think Saquon's going to come back. He's going to be a stud. And I don't have my updated rankings right in front of me, but I think I'd have Saquon's RB4 maybe for me. I'd still go CMC first, Dalvin Cook second, Derrick Henry third in lieu of the Julio Jones to Tennessee news. I think that can't be understated or overstated rather enough for what that's going to do for Derrick Henry. It's just wheels up for that guy. But then I don't know how you don't have Saquon as the next guy up there. It's just the pass catching upside is immense. Yeah,
it's definitely it's definitely going to be a fun conversation because I don't think there's a clear 101. So as we get further and further, into the summer and as we approach redrafts, we're going to be talking about this and what you should do. every time I look at the top of the board, I'm like, man, I hope I get pick 5 or 6 or 7 because I don't really love any of the guys like Kamara's not there for me now, like what he was, and I still think Zeke's gonna have a great year. There's no reason I need to take him that high. So like you kind of feel pressure to take one of those other guys you just mentioned, rightfully so. They're coming off great years. But anyway, we'll dive into all that stuff as we get closer. We're 15 minutes into this thing. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us for a bit. We're talking tight ends, so we got plenty of time. Don't worry. But we're going to be looking at our tight end strategy for this year as we're kind of, again, here in mid-June. It's definitely going to be an interesting year because we've added another name, I guess, to the list of elites. Let's just start. Yeah. Let's just jump right into that because I think that's honestly, whether you're tight end, you're either tight end early or you're wait till the end of time. More than likely, those should be your strategies. If you're taking those middle of the road guys in rounds 6 or 7 or 8, you're probably asking for pain because those guys rarely pan out to be difference makers. You can usually find guys later on in your draft, but obviously the name I'm alluding to here is Kyle Pitts, Jake of your Atlanta Falcons. He's in sleeper ADP. They've been publishing ADPs, and they're giving us redraft PPR ADP right now. He's tight end 4. He's 48th overall off the board, which is the end of the 4th round. The dude's on freaking fire now that Julio Jones is out of town. He's quickly being moved up people's rankings. So I guess overall, before we just dive into kind of positional overview and strategy, like I think Kyle Pitts is a key piece we need to cover. So what's your thoughts on Pitts? How are you approaching him into his rookie season?
Well, in general, like we, like you said, we can get a little more into tight end strategy as we go along here, but it's been just, there's those first couple beast tight ends. And then after that, I'm out. I'm waiting until round 16. That's where I'm going to get my Mark Andrews of 2019. Mm-hmm. Those guys are going to pop off flying under the radar. They're in line for a huge amount of volume. That guy's Kyle Pitts this year. And you know what? There's kind of like a big 6 this year. Like I'm not totally out on tight end if Kelsey's off the board, if Kittle's off the board. I'm all in on Darren Waller this year, and I haven't been in the past. I'm all in on Hawkinson this year, and then the aforementioned Kyle Pitts. Mm-hmm. I think the stage is literally set for this guy. Like, I mean, he can finish as tight end 1 as soon as this season. I know that sounds crazy, and people are going to hear that and roll their eyeballs, but Julio Jones, the guy was good for 150 targets. If he was healthy for 16 games, that was the kind of volume he was getting. And now he's totally gone. And I understand that, that the targets 150 targets aren't going to just funnel to Kyle Pitts, but Matt Ryan, he's now missing that big-bodied receiver that he's been used to for the past decade. That guy is gone right now. And Calvin Ridley, he's going to eat. He's going to be incredible this year. But they've got to have another way to be able to move the ball down the field. They're not going to have a great run game. This defense that Atlanta has is going to get torched just like they did last year and the year before. Atlanta averaged the 3rd most pass plays per game in 2020. It's seriously just wheels up for Kyle Pitts. We joked about his ADP plenty, heading up, right after the draft. He's the super touted tight end. They usually take 3 years anyways to pop off. People are betting on just total upside. Now you said he's 48th overall?
Yeah.
Seems like it might be a bargain, man. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's literally, I believe he's going to be a wide receiver in the Atlanta offense, practically a wide receiver in the Atlanta offense with a tight end designation for fantasy. It's the new era of the Atlanta Falcons, their new coaching staff, their new front office, and they go out there and Kyle Pitts, 4th pick overall. I mean, that's making a statement. The earliest tight end ever taken in an NFL draft. I mean, they put their stock in this guy. This is the statement that the team came out and made. We're taking over, and we're going to start by making our first move with Kyle Pitts. And this was, again, to remind you, when Julio Jones was still on the team. It wasn't like, oh, man, we have this big need now for a pass catcher. They were all in on Kyle Pitts before that, even though that there was tempting options on the board, even though there was, killer quarterbacks. There was Jamar Chase out there. They could have traded back like a lot of Falcons fans, including myself, are hoping for. But again, with how much stock they put into him, 4th overall pick, they're not going to just throttle him into this offense. I would be shocked. I think this guy is going to be a star in week 1. I think he's going to come out there, light the world on fire, and I think he's going to be even harder to acquire in tight end premium dynasty leagues than he already is right now. Have you kicked the tires at all on Kyle Pitts? I'm sure you play in some tight end premium, Kyle, but I can't even think of an offer that isn't insulting.
I tried. I did in one league. Somebody was they put him up, and I'm like, okay, let's see. Let's just see where this person's at with him. And my asking price apparently was not anywhere. I don't even remember what it was. Like, and I obviously wasn't giving my best offer at the beginning because you would never do that. Sure. But like, I wasn't even close. He's like, dude, he's like, I'm not.
Funny. When people put players on the block, that's so full of shit, and I'm guilty of it too. You're not saying I want to trade this player. You're saying throw me your highest bid, entire league. I want to see who's willing to severely overpay for this player, and then maybe I'll pull the trigger on him.
Yeah, it's definitely, you usually have those two scenarios of either, like I'm trying to cash out, it's blatantly obvious, and
stock's through the roof right now.
Yeah, or obviously the most common one on the other side is like, I'm frustrated as hell. I want this guy off my roster. And usually that's when I'm throwing more bids out there, or, trying to see what I can get. But yeah, it's not that way, obviously, for Kyle Pitts. The dude is the hottest name right now amongst tight ends, probably.
It could be.
And it's no joke. Even in redraft, people are expecting production right out of the gate. I think you said a lot of key things there, Jake, and spot on. So, just the highlights for me, going, for what my thoughts on Pitts, and just to reiterate a little, was this is an organization that they probably knew that they were getting rid of Julio, right? Sure. But they still took him over Jamar Chase, and in the draft. And this is a team, you mentioned it, the targets that Julio sees is unbelievable. You look at just last year, Kelsey and Waller. Kelsey actually played one last game. They both had 145 targets. Exactly. Weird. Kittle on a per game basis was about 125. And then Logan Thomas had 110 and Hawkinson had 101. Those are, so to just say like Pitt's like, oh, maybe 120 targets, like that's top 5 at the position right out of the gate. And I don't think that's far-fetched based off of the things that you mentioned as well. The game script should go his way. They don't have anyone else there. They committed no other resources to the wide receiver position or any pass catchers. So I think Pitts is truly a wide receiver labeled as a tight end for fantasy, and that's what you should be taking advantage of. So that's big time.
It's easy to get excited about the 150 vacated targets that you're going to get from Julio Jones, but I mean, let's look at the tight end position too. Hayden Hurst saw 87 targets last year, and he's still on the team. Like he's going to be involved, but it's the Kyle Pitts show right now. I mean, that's volume that he's going to be taking. I mean, this guy is going to see. I'm telling you, man, it's going to be biblical. The amount of volume that this guy's going to see in his rookie year is just going to totally blow apart the entire philosophy of wide receivers in their 3-year growth period that they need to become successful in the NFL. I'm certain that Kyle Pitts is going to break that model.
So you mentioned Hayden Hurst. He actually tied for 10th amongst tight ends with 88 targets. That was the same amount of targets as Mark Andrews.
Wow.
I'm telling you, dude.
Yeah.
And honestly, that was something that when and I don't even know if we talked about on this show, so maybe I did people a disservice, but like when the Julio news came out, I started looking around for Hayden Hurst shares. Like I was like, why not? I mean, like they could run 2 tight end sets. He could be their 3rd best pass catcher on that team. And he's a free agent. So if you're in Dynasty League, that's a little scratch off for next year. Just see where he lands, right? There's plenty of teams that need tight ends.
Yeah.
He proved himself to be, perfectly fine as a startable guy for fantasy purposes. So I would not be surprised if we're sitting here, maybe not to start the year, because I still think there's 12 other tight ends that are clearly better than Hayden Hurst for your fantasy team. But there's more than 12. But I think that I wouldn't be surprised if by week 4 or 5, when we're getting to those bye weeks, it's like, hey, you could plug and play Hayden Hurst here. Like he's getting 5 targets a game, and that's for a tight end. That's pretty damn good. So, I was slow to come around on Kyle Pitts. I still think for me, he is the last. I think he's, for me still, I haven't committed to putting him in a tier with those top 3 guys. He's like in his own little tier that's just like a quarter step below Waller and Kittle.
Sure.
And then for me, then that's just his price tag is just a little bit too high. We'll see. Maybe I come around and maybe I just take that leap for him right there. But I don't. I do think he is tight end 4. I do think that his price tag is, while a little bit high, is not crazy. And if you want to take him, that's where you got to take him. He's one of the hottest names. People are going to be targeting this guy because of all the hype surrounding him. And in an offense that should be throwing the ball quite a bit, even though there's some unknowns with the new coaching staff there, I don't think they're going to have a choice. You cannot ball control that with that defense. That's just not how it goes. So,
real quick, speaking to those tiers, the way I kind of see it set up right now is I do have Travis Kelce sitting at the top there on his tight end throne. And then George Kittle. And actually, I think our top 6 are pretty much exactly the same, if I'm not correct. But George Kittle and Darren Waller, I think that separates a nice, solid it's still an elite tight end tier, but not quite Travis Kelce, but no one is. And then that's where I have the Kyle Pitts, the Kyle Pitts bracket. Kyle Pitts, TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews, in that order. And I'd like those guys as the super upside, yet I'm still high floor type of tight ends. After that, man, I mean, you could name, you can name 10 other guys as tight end 7, and I'd probably take it. I'd be like, all right, I'll hear you out on it. But I got Dallas Goedert in that spot for reference. But it's a big 6 for me this year in tight end: Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Darren Waller, Kyle Pitts, TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews. After that, I'm super out on tight end. I'll watch every tight end fall off the board until my last pick. If I'm playing in a league with defense and kickers, I'm taking the tight end after my defense and kicker. There's plenty of guys that are going to be available to choose from. So before I cut you off there, Kyle, you can now have the floor back.
Oh no, I was going to say, I think that's going to be the consensus all the way around. I think that's going to be those 6 guys. If you're not, I mean, when you look at Pitts even and Hawkinson, I think these are guys that you're going to see volume. Andrews has not traditionally been a 100+ target guy. I don't think that necessarily changes this year. But he finds the end zone.
Are you worried about the fact that they're adding the wide receivers now, and he's not like the GOAT, like the de facto target in Baltimore?
Not really. I mean, he's still. I still think he's a big part of their offense. He's going to score. He's been traditionally a guy that his fantasy value is tied to his touchdown. Potential, and that's come to fruition the last few years, even with a down year, from Lamar, I guess, as far as, his touchdowns not being that crazy ass number we saw in 2019. But Andrews for me is like, he's kind of like, I don't know. Are they tiers if they just include one person at a time? But like, it's like, I like Hawkinson. Tier? Yeah. It's like, it's Pitts by himself, Hawkinson by himself, Andrews by himself. And then please God, get away from me. Because I'm looking at the ADP right now. And again, ADP is exactly those names you mentioned. Andrews actually ahead of Hawkinson in ADP right now. But then Noah Fant is only 8 spots behind Hawkinson. So it's like, if people, and whether it's Fant or Goddard, I've seen those 2 names kicked around a bunch for that spot. No, I mean, that's there's no chance in hell. That's not a 1-round difference. That's multi-round difference. Yeah. And, so it's definitely, you have to make your decision with, if everyone is on the consensus that there's 6 guys, that's half your league is going to end up with one of those tight ends. You mentioned Kelce being on a throne by himself, and I pulled it up because last year was just freaking utterly ridiculous. 11 touchdowns was a big year for him. Kelce has gotten a ton of production over the course of his career without being a huge touchdown guy. He was last year, 105 receptions, over 1,400 yards. He averaged per game, 3 more points per game than Darren Waller, who was second, which is insanity. When you look down to it, Mark Andrews was tight end 4 in points per game. You can go all the way down to like the edge of tight end 1 territory, like around tight end 12 in points per game. That's a 1.5 difference from Andrews all the way down to like 13, 14 in points per game. So you're talking about like just crazy how much better Kelce was than the rest of the field. That hasn't been the case over the last few years. As much as Kelce has been tight end 1, he hasn't been just that much better than everybody else, but last year was just crazy. So I guess for kicking it back to you, Jake, like traditionally, how have you handled tight end, and like, what are your expectations for this year? Obviously we talked about that giant tier break for both of us, probably, that it's you got to get one of your 6 or out. But how do you generally lean? Are you generally going to shoot for that tight end early? Have you done that in the past? And like, what's your plan for this year as it's shaking out here in June?
I'm not traditionally looking to go for a tight end early. Maybe if I'm in a weird spot in the first round where, like, depending on what year we're drafting in, maybe there's a weird tier break at running back and maybe there's only 2 wide receivers that I really like right there and those guys are gone. Now you're forced to look at Travis Kelce, and probably this year more than any year before because of that crazy season that you just referenced there. 260 fantasy points from weeks 1 through 16. That was good for wide receiver 3, right behind Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill. I mean, that's the kind of value that you're getting, and this is a guy that you're plugging into your tight end spot. Like, and Robert Tonyan, a guy who finished as tight end 3, 142 fantasy points, was good for wide receiver 34, which is pretty much like Jarvis Landry territory. So just to, again, echo that, we've talked about it plenty of times on this show, just the difference between that tier that Travis Kelce's in by himself and then the guys that you have squeaking into tight end 3, which when you say tight end 3 sounds like this, you're stoked to have the tight end 3 on your team, but really, how does that how does that end up producing for you from a fantasy perspective? Heading into this year, though, I've been thinking about it, and given those numbers, I think it's justifiable to take Travis Kelce at the end of the first round. I wouldn't have had that thought process before, even in the the Rob Gronkowski prime days. It felt weird taking him in the first round. Mm-hmm. The guys you have to pass on to take a tight end. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then just the fact that in the back of my mind, I know that if I go with that strategy of waiting till the 16th round to take my tight end, that I can hit the lottery. And I won more than one league on the back of Mark Andrews in 2019, and he was that guy. He popped up in training camp. He had he had a little bit of buzz, and he ended up being a megastar. You know what? It's still going to be probably that way for me. And it's not because of any beef with Travis Kelce. I'd love to have Travis Kelce on my team, but you and I have talked about our basic draft strategy and how we approach things, and we're kind of similar. Like, we both love that anchor running back strategy. So 9 times out of 10, depending where I'm at in the first round, if I'm anywhere in the first half, it's for sure going to be a running back, right? If Travis Kelce finds his way to me in the second round, I mean, there would have to be someone golden on the board for me to pass on him at that point. I mean, just the value that Kelce presents there. But like I said, in the first round, I love doing that anchor running back thing. It's going to be hard for me to not take, if we're not playing super flex, it's going to be hard for me to not just start loading up on wide receivers after that. So, generally, I'm gonna wait on it. I'm gonna take a few shots maybe at the end of the draft, a few tight ends with some high upside. And there's a lot of those guys this year. I actually wrote a couple names down. Like Adam Troutman, I think, is a guy that you had ranked on your rankings. Cole Kmet, a couple younger guys. I like Gerald Everett in Seattle. Jared Cook, man. I mean, a guy that no one's talking about. Not much of a dynasty asset at his old age, but he's going to be, he's going to be the shit in Los Angeles in a Justin Herbert offense. That's a guy that I want for redraft this year. So if it's between me taking, I'll just say it like this. If it's going to be Travis Kelce in the first round, and I'm, if I'm not going to do that, then I'm going to take Jared Cook in the whatever round, and I want to pass on Travis Kelce. I do. That's just what it comes down to. I want to leave the first round with Saquon Barkley. You know what I'm saying? I want to leave the first round with Zeke. I'm fine with that. It's just something about that tight end in the first round, even when they're producing like Travis Kelce, makes me a little weary when I know that some jerk in my league is going to end up taking Adam Troutman with their last pick, and he's going to end up with being the second most targeted receiver on the Saints in a Jameis Winston offense. But that's mostly it, man. That's probably how I'm going to be approaching it this year. I'll be waiting on tight end. I probably won't get a lot of Travis Kelce unless maybe it's a home league and someone's not with, even in a home league, man. I mean, Travis Kelce's a household name by now. He is the Rob Gronkowski of 2021, 2020, 2019. But I'm not going to get him. And at that point, I'm not going to make the plunge on George Kittle over the wide receivers that are going to be available at that point. I'm probably not going to do it on Darren Waller. Someone's going to reach for Kyle Pitts before I will. So I'll end up waiting. I'll grab my tight end at the end of the draft.
Yeah. And I'm probably going to lean that way as well. they were definitely. I ended up with Kelsey in a lot more leagues than I expected last year, and I was successful in a lot of those leagues because, dude, the guy, like we said earlier, like he was a freaking monster. Like, I actually, the number I was looking at before was I apparently defaulted to standard scoring, and even half PPR in points per game, Kelsey was actually more than 3 points better than Darren Waller. 3 points better than the number 2 guy at the position. So every week,
who had an incredible season, Darren Waller. I mean, did you say 1,400 yards for Kelsey?
1,400 yards.
That's stupid.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And so the fact that gap, obviously, like, man, when I'm sitting at the end of the year, like looking at all my teams that are in championships or win championships, I'm like, they all have Travis Kelsey on them, right? And the dude was a stud every single freaking week. So it's just like, but I think the thing to keep in mind is just, I don't know that there's going to be that big of a gap again this year.
I was going to say, and real quick, while it's on my head, the argument that you can make instead of, for not making that plunge for Travis Kelsey and taking those other positional players this year is it does seem like more of a big 6 than a big 3 or a big 2 like it's been in previous years. Like you said earlier in this episode, like if there's a big 6, then that means half of your league has a stud tight end. You don't have so much of a positional advantage by having obviously it's still going to be an advantage if you have Travis Kelsey. He's going to stomp all over whoever your opponent's stupid tight end is, but not to the degree I think of last year. I think that Hawkinson takes a huge step forward this year. I think, now we got Kyle Pitts coming into the league. We can see a step up, we can see what happens with Mark Andrews, but I guess you could say that would be the devil's advocate for maybe not making that plunge on Travis Kelsey and maybe sticking with the late round tight end strategy.
And usually when I'm like giving advice on when to take Travis, and the discussion's been around Travis Kelsey the last few years, like when to take him, it's like I usually tell people don't even rank Travis Kelsey in your tight ends. It doesn't matter. He's one. Rank him amongst your wide receivers,
sure,
and weigh that he will fill a position that you don't have. I'd much rather try to fill my last wide receiver spot, than try to keep throwing darts at these really shitty tight ends off the wire. If I wait really long and then I don't get a guy that I can start, I'm hunting for one, right? So that's why for me, I do end up with Kelsey more probably than I would otherwise without that mindset. Just because when I'm looking at it, like even going into this year, I take Tyreek Hill over him, even with a position. And as long as Rodgers is in Green Bay, when come August, like I'm taking Devontae Adams. But that's the list. Those are the 2 receivers I'm taking over Travis Kelsey. So when you look at it, then it kind of becomes like, okay, well, how big of a tier gap is that between those 2 and Diggs or Metcalf or Jefferson, whatever your choices. So like if you're sitting there at the 110, 111, okay, just take Kelsey and then just get the guy that's left, coming back around. You don't need to take, Diggs first because he's high in your rankings and then give somebody else the opportunity to take Travis Kelsey out from under you. So that's kind of usually my approach there, is just looking at the end of the draft. I'm not taking him over usually any of my, elite 7 or 8 running backs. And we'll dive into those names more specifically later on this summer. But yeah, it's for me, if you can get Waller in round 3, I dig that. His ADP is such that you can get him at the end of towards the end of round 3, 34th overall off the board right now as tight end 3. Yeah. That's solid. I like that a lot. I think that that fits pretty nice.
Waller can finish as tight end 1 this year. Oh, that's totally in play.
Yeah, he's a monster. And to get him there, what is this? Almost 11, 12 picks behind Kittle. Like, I like Kittle a lot, but I think him and Waller are pretty damn close. And the fact that everyone kind of craps on Waller, even though he's done it 2 straight years, I don't necessarily get that. But traditionally, yeah, man, I'm usually a guy that just waits and then I just play this game of like they all suck. So, we're all like, most of us are all screwed in this together, except for the guys that own Waller and Kelsey pretty much. But the thing is that I'm screwed and I didn't take him to the last round. You're screwed because you took, Zach Ertz in round 6,
dude, is Zach Ertz still an Eagle?
He is still an Eagle. In fact,
no kidding.
He's tight end 12 in sleeper ADP. He is way behind. Like there is like a pretty big drop between where they're at overall, but
he's being dropped as tight end 12.
Yes.
That doesn't seem right.
I hope that situation resolves itself because it feels Like, I don't want Hunter Henry or Johnny Smith.
I thought Zach Ertz retired 5 months ago or something.
He's only like 31. I mean, he's not.
I know, but I haven't heard the guy's name. I thought it was the Dallas Goedert show now in Philadelphia. There was like rumors that he was going to be traded to Indianapolis, and then nothing happened. I just assumed he retired with Todd Gurley or something.
He's still out there. He's still in Philly. So I hope that situation gets resolved before training camp.
That isn't that old either. Like you just 30. Like you think of Zach Ertz, he's been like this seasoned veteran. I mean, I guess he is, but he should have a few more good years under him.
I picked him up in some startups last year in Dynasty, thinking like, oh, yeah, he was cheap. You know, he's not that much older than Waller, right? He's only a couple years, but like tight ends, and I think he's the same age as Kelsey. And I was just like, you know, he should still be good for tight end 1 year over the next couple of seasons. And I saw, you know, I thought at the time too that Carson Wentz would still be in Philadelphia, but yeah, now it's just a situation that's a little bit messy. You know, Goddard's a guy right now I think is going to fly up draft boards if that happens. He's tight end 9 right now in ADP, right around 95th overall. I think he jumps dramatically if Ertz gets dealt. Then I think Ertz could be in play then as a startable guy. But yeah, dude, this position for me is usually one that I'm waiting on, and I'll just play the roulette game towards the end of the year. The other thing that I think quarterback's the same way in one QB leagues. I'm sure I'll say this again next week. Is that with your tight end, if you're doing the strategy that Jake and I are suggesting, which I'm sure a lot of you do, is just wait to the end to pick your guy. Then it gets real important looking at those early season matchups. If I have a guy that has a good matchup in week 1, hell yeah, there we go. I can start with him, and then future me deals with weeks 2 through 17 or whatever. But sometimes you can find a guy that gets you a few weeks. You're like, oh, okay, I'm going to project this guy. Like looking at it, all right, he's got 3 of his first 4 matchups are good. All right, I'm going to roll with him. You know, you're going to give him an edge over. You know, you might not like him over the course of the season better than some other players that might be available. But if his matchups are better, I mean, we're all setting lineups in week 1. We're all doing rankings or looking at rankings in week 1, and all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, Eric Ebron's all of a sudden like, you know, a thing. Yeah, you know, that could be a thing. You know, you just because the matchups, you could get a guy like, man, I really like this guy as far as some upside, but his matchups are horrible. You might be better off just cutting him anyway and going to get the guy that has the better matchup of the group. And I just threw out Ebron as he has the bill, so you're probably not drafting him just for reference. But as we get closer, we'll highlight those names of, you know, some of these lower end guys that we like that are going to benefit from early season matchups. And also, obviously, the opposite. Like I said, Ebron might be a guy that you can spot start, but if he's playing Buffalo week 1, maybe that's not a position you want to put yourself in. So maybe you're going to rank him a little bit lower in your rankings for your draft because, yeah, it's like, man, I'm just going to cut him right away because his matchup is one I want to avoid. So unlike any other position, you know.
And tight end's tricky too, as far as like projecting matchups. I guess like later in the season, once you start to get a little bit of data on how these teams are playing against the tight end, like there's usually 1, 2, or 3 teams that are just for some reason like they don't even try to stop the tight end position. It happens every single year.
Jacksonville plays Houston week 1, so prepare yourselves for the Tebow drafters in your league.
Listen, hold on, don't just graze over that. People are going to joke about Tim Tebow, but you know what's going to happen, right? You know there's going to be a point, and God forbid, I hope this doesn't happen. I'm knocking on wood right now. Where Trevor Lawrence goes down in like week 10, right? Who's the backup? Who's the backup for Jackson?
It's still Minshew. He's still there.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Still Minshew.
Yeah, that goes against my
crush your narrative.
I did crush my narrative, but I could just see it happening. I close my eyes, I squint, and I see Urban Meyer being like, Tim, let's run it back like the old days. He throws him out there and he throws some interceptions. But I'm just saying that's a tight end or a quarterback who's eligible as a tight end. I'm just telling you right now, you heard it here first. It's going to stir up some serious drama this fantasy season. Coming to a fantasy team near you.
I can't take any more.
I'm not saying to draft Tim Tebow or to pick up Tim Tebow. I'm just saying it's going to happen.
It probably will. That's just the hell that we get every year with these guys. Like, oh, you can cheat code him into this position. Like, Jesus.
At the very least, I guarantee you they draw up a play or two.
Oh, for sure. Because it's like, we got to show everybody we're right.
Yeah, where Tebow ends up throwing a touchdown pass to Trevor Lawrence or something weird like that.
Oh, and then you won't be able to scroll through Twitter without seeing it because all week he's going to be featured in every damn waiver wire column that's ever written.
Oh yeah, and he'll probably have the cover of Sports Illustrated.
I'm not messing around with that, but yeah, man, I think that this is clearly a position where it's so cut and dry. You can wait to the end, and it's like you have to either get your guy early or not, because those middle round guys they have to really hit in order just to return that value. That there's just there's too big of a gap between the top guys, and the gap is not wide enough between the fringe guys that you can draft at the very end to pick up off the waivers once the season starts, and then those guys that you had to spend a 7th or 8th round pick on. I'm just not about that. You mentioned a few names. Was there anybody else as far as just some names to monitor, for the group of us that is going to be waiting? Did you have anybody else that kind of jumped out to you that you want to keep on your radar?
Yes, and it's super ironic because there was one guy who I was like, well, there was a couple guys I was super against a couple years ago. One of them was Josh Allen. I screwed that one up. I own that one. Josh Allen is pretty okay, but I was very against drafting Tyler Higbee. And now I'm thinking about it. And this is a guy, I went through your old rankings, Kyle. Again, they're not updated yet. So maybe, it's been on your mind and you want to get Tyler Higbee in there. But with Gerald Everett now going to Seattle, I feel like maybe we can rekindle some of that magic we saw at the end of the 2019 season, where you couldn't watch the Rams without seeing Tyler Higbee put up 100 yards and a touchdown. He was playing absolutely off the charts when Gerald Everett wasn't involved. We got gunslinger Matt Stafford now in the offense as opposed to Jared Goff. So I feel like, again, I'm not like a super fan of the talent or anything. He doesn't have any crazy athletic measurables. He was a 4th round pick out of Western Kentucky, 28 years old. He doesn't bring anything super incredible to the table, but if he's going to be the tight end of choice for the Rams with a quarterback upgrade, I'm interested. And he's probably going to go undrafted in a lot of leagues just because of how disappointing he was last year. Mm-hmm. You have any thoughts on Higbee? Am I missing something here? They didn't sign another tight end and I don't know about it?
No, I think you're spot on. Just like post hype a little bit here. Like, this is a guy that was extremely overhyped last year. There was no reason to take him. He ended up being that, round 8, round 9 tight end, maybe even round 7 in some spots. And he crapped the bed. And you were left picking off of the waiver tree, just like everybody else that didn't just set their 8th round pick on fire. So I think Higbee, though, it's sleeper right now. And this is just as of last week, June 14th. He's tight end 18 off the board, so he's free. You can take your shot.
Dude, I promise he finishes higher than tight end 18. I feel like he has to. And again, this feels so weird, like pumping the tires for a guy that 365 days ago, I was like, I am totally hands off. I'm not even going to think about Higbee. You sucker if you're going to draft Tyler Higbee in the 6th round, which happened. It was weird. People just fell in love with, again, the idea of just 100 yards every single week. Like, just automatically, he was on fire. People were giving him those Gronk comparisons. That anyone who scores 100, anyone who gets 100 yards every single week is going to draw that comparison. But I don't know, man. I don't expect them to be putting up those kind of numbers week in and week out. But I feel like there's some sort of upside there, especially if one of Robert Woods or Cooper Kupp happens to miss time. There's not like a super deep receiving core. They got rid of Josh Reynolds. I think that there's some things I could like in that offense. What are you laughing about? You got some.
I just love Josh Reynolds so much, and he's just dead. He died. R.I.P. Josh Reynolds' fantasy value. That was a fun 2.5 months we had.
Send him to Atlanta, man. Somewhere where he can thrive.
Let's go.
Somewhere that needs receivers.
How did they not include Josh Reynolds in the Julio Jones trade? That would have been.
I would have told them, no deal unless you throw in Josh.
Yes, precisely. That would have been perfect. Higbee. I'll take 137th overall Tyler Higbee over, my God, 85th overall Mike Gesicki. They've pretty much been very similar. Gesicki had a nice little run. Higbee's done it before, too. Like, these guys are not difference makers. I don't feel like, as far as what they bring to the table, you're looking for some value. Higbee is a guy that he's somebody that I was surprised to see him that low. So he'll be a guy that I throw on a few rosters. You mentioned it, the guy that you hated a year ago, and now you're kind of propping up.
Yeah, I mean, as long as the price is right, I feel like it was the same way with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. If you want to look at the running back position, I was nowhere near that ADP last year, but now this year he seems totally affordable.
The other guy, the guy for me that fits that same exact bill, he's going about 12 to 15 spots earlier than Higbee, but still late. Tight end 15, Evan Ingram. I mean, we have an argument on this show, I'm pretty sure, about Evan Ingram because I wouldn't put him in my top 12. I just still don't know if I'm putting him there, but if he's tight end 15 and I can just pluck him out in round 15, 16 in my draft, apparently, okay, I'll take that shot. Why not?
I got to be honest with you. I came out a couple months ago as the Evan Ingram truther on this show.
Yes.
He's now higher in your rankings than he is in mine by one spot. So you are now officially the Evan Ingram guy on the Fantasy Football Smackdown. Congratulations. You know what guy you are on the Fantasy Football Smackdown? You're the Noah Fant guy. Are you still feel the same way about him? You have him in your rankings here that I'm looking at number 7. Which falls right outside that big top 6. So what is it about Noah Fant? I mean, you don't have to tell me what it is about Noah Fant as far as like the athleticism and whatnot. The dude's a freak, and I feel like on any other team he'd be just uber elite. But I'll just say what everyone's thinking. The quarterback situation concerns me.
Yeah. Solid numbers last year. 93 targets, 62 receptions. 675 yards, only 3 touchdowns. That's what really wrecked his fantasy value. So I think I rank him 7 because I do feel like he is the 7th best tight end. When you get to that point, you really do need to start, and you can't do this for your rankings necessarily, but like if I'm factoring in value and what you have to pay for these guys, like I'm not paying, round 6, round 7 prices for Noah Fant. I will pay round 10 price for Noah Fant when he's there, which will be never. He's unfortunately, he will be tagged, I think, by consensus. Him and Goddard will share this belt probably as the first non-top 6 tight end, which is also referred to as tight end 7. But with that, I'm not paying that price. They will be drafted way too early. And like we talked about earlier, the gap between where they will finish and someone you can get 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds later is just, it's not enough to pay that price. So again, if everything's even and they're all sitting there, outside of the top 6, they're all sitting there in round 10, I'm taking Noah Fant. I think he can get you that, around 100 targets. His yardage numbers have been pretty solid last year. If the touchdowns were at, 5 or 6, I think he'd be on people's more on people's radar this year. But and of course, like we've talked about on every show, so you can drink, that Denver quarterback situation didn't get resolved like we were hoping.
Yeah.
So that was disappointing. But yeah, man, I think he's for sure my tight end 7. I just will never own him anywhere either because I'm not paying the price to get him.
So tell me this, and I don't mean to totally hijack the show here, but another guy that I keep wanting to push up my rankings is Blake Jarwin. Like he had some hype going into last season before he get injured in training camp. Is that right?
It was week 1. I thought it was week 1.
I knew it was super, super early.
Yeah.
Dalton Schultz took over, did a fine job. Is it just like a predetermined conclusion that Blake Jarwin's coming in and he's the tight end 1 again? Or do you think they're going to do some sort of like goofy mashup? I'm asking you, being the Cowboys fan on this show, if you have some sort of insider trade information. But I love the idea of having, if it's just Blake Jarwin, I think having the tight end 1 in this Dallas Cowboys offense, it's going to be one of the best offenses in the league for sure, has to present some sort of value. But I'm not so interested if Dalton Schultz is, if they're going to be splitting it up like a Minnesota Kyle Rudolph, Irv Smith type, like 50-50 right down the middle, 50 targets for you, 50 targets for you, then I'm out. But if Blake Jarwin's getting the entire meal, then I'm very interested. So how do you think that the targets get distributed there?
Yeah, so I didn't want to completely get dropped off this call, so I didn't push my internet this hard. That's how ridiculous my life is this moment with this. But Schultz only saw 1 target week 1. So if my memory serves me right, in combination with that, is that I'm pretty sure that Jarwin got injured during the week 1 game.
Makes sense.
But we talked earlier, Hayden Hurst Mark Andrews, 88 targets, coming in at tied for 10th at the position. Dalton Schultz had one more target than them. So it's just it's crazy how much they do utilize the tight end. There's plenty of opportunity for them. Now, mentioned earlier, because I do like Blake Jarwin. I do think he will be the guy in Dallas, like solely. I think Schultz did a great job. He way outperformed what everyone had expectations. Like literally, the beat writers that I follow for the Cowboys every week were like, "Holy crap, Dalton Schultz still like, man, like he's just a grinder, lunch pail, hard hat dude. Like he stuck around. He's been on the team now for a while. Great contributor. But I think Jarwin, while not over the top, this is a guy that Dallas has faith in. They gave him a contract extension prior to last season. They showed with their money that they trust Jarwin as their tight end 1. I think he will be the tight end 1 for the Cowboys in an offense that should give their tight end 85 to 90 targets, however that looks now, plus in an extra game, right? So the only sticky point, because as I was looking through the schedule very quickly to see where Eric Ebron was and who he was playing in week 1, the Cowboys play Tampa Bay in week 1. So he kind of if he gets lumped, if he isn't strong enough for you to be pushed into that, I don't care, I'm drafting this guy and playing him to start the season. If he's in that little group of, all right, matchup dependent tight ends to start the year, that's not a great matchup. So, and the fact that he's coming back from injury. So we'll obviously have to keep a close eye on his recovery, but it was early on in the season. So I do have a lot of faith in Blake Jarwin to produce fantasy points. It's my struggle is more of, how do I acquire this man? Do I draft him and hope that he's good to go from the beginning, or can I wait and see and hope that he's on the wire when I'm good and ready to plug him in? So that's going to be the tough part.
Yeah, that'll probably be the case, and I'm sure you have to throw just about 0 fab on him, because again, I'll probably put up a dud against Tampa Bay in week 1, and that's just a matter of if you're willing to make the roster space at that point. But so all in all, you're saying like you do think it's going to be Blake Jarwin's job? Yeah,
I think he's for me, he's borderline top 12. So if he's around, if he's sitting there, sitting here in June, the reports are he should be ready for camp coming around and everything. If that's true and he's ready to go healthy, I'm going to roll him out there, and he'll be one of the guys that I'll kind of throw in that little group of guys I want to target in rounds, 13 plus.
Anyone like super stands out to you from like the, we'll say, I don't know, tight end 8 through tight end infinity that you really like?
I want to love Irv Smith like a lot. But
me too. They're putting out updates that they're not. Oh, we're not going to use Irv Smith much more. I'll tell you, I won't buy that for a second, Kyle August.
I hope that they're a bunch of liars over there. He is tight end 14 right now on ADP on Sleeper. So if that holds true, I'm good with that. If he starts creeping up to like Noah Fant levels of ADP, then I start getting a little bit worried. So if I take him, outside the top 10, I can see how this goes. If Coach Zim's if he's a liar, then thank God, and I have a stud on my team. If he's not, he's only getting 2 to 4 targets a game, and you're relying on an end zone look, then that's concerning, and you're probably falling back down to the guys that hopefully see a little bit more involvement in their offense. So he's a guy that I'm waiting for that hype train to jump up a little bit on. But yeah, other than that, for me, Troutman, Everett, those are the other 2 guys that are in that Jarwin range. I like Kmet, but I am concerned about Jimmy Graham still being there. They threw to Graham a lot last year, so
it was like tight end 10 or something.
He was solid from a fantasy perspective. Oh, did I lose him? I lost him, guys. He left the building. Who knows? Jake Rip is gone. If you're watching on YouTube, you're probably like, what the hell just happened? So apparently I'm going to fill this air by myself. We'll see if I can get him back in here for a moment. But for now, we are rolling, and we'll give Jake another minute. As we wrap up this show, if you're listening on the podcast, who knows if I'm going to edit this or not. There's Jake. He is back.
Well, that was embarrassing.
What happened?
So I was going to look up a stat, and I hit the X button on the thing, but I'm back. I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, so that stat isn't going to be as important. Actually, I do remember what we were talking about. It was Jimmy freaking Graham. Who would have thought that was the topic of conversation that I'd be coming back to?
Brought the house down, Jimmy Graham.
They brought the house down. But yeah, Jimmy Graham, man, tight end 10, and like So he falls into the end zone 2 more times just randomly. He's like pretty much tight end 4, tight end 3. Like that's how close he was. And that's just how small that gap is between, in that tight end 3 through tight end, whatever, tight end 12 area. He was that close, but it's funny. You think of Jimmy Graham being as Mr. Irrelevant in some sense, but still, like you said, still involved. You think Cole Kmet eats into that at all this year?
I think he will, but does he eat into it enough to become fantasy relevant? It's gonna be tough, man.
In redraft, I would say probably not, but the dynasty community is still going to be all over this guy.
Yeah, it's fine. I still think and it fits real nice into that narrative. Oh, it takes 3 years for tight ends to get moving. Well, Jimmy Graham will probably be gone by Kmet's third year. So you still have that hope, but I've originally going in without looking into much. I was like, hell yeah, Cole Kmet. I'm pumped for this guy. And then as I was looking, I'm like, I think that's not true. I think I was just making things up in my head. He's not going to be presented with the same opportunity as Troutman, as an example, in direct comparison for a sophomore guy. But anyway, well, thanks for that heart attack because I was like, where the hell did he go?
I was in the middle of talking too, and I just had to audibly say out loud, "Oh shit!"
I'm sitting here, I'm like, dude, what did my computer do now? This piece of crap. And then the backdrop thingy was all over my face. I was trying to figure out how to get that to go away.
That's fun for you YouTube listeners. See, you're missing out now. You're listening to the podcast now, but you wish you were subscribed to the DWZ YouTube channel.
Man, that was really crazy. Anyway, any parting thoughts, Jake? Or I guess your parting thoughts for the second time?
You know what? I'll leave it on the bold take. I really have a feeling that Travis Kelce finishes tight end 1. You can write me down, write it in ink, write it in black Sharpie. And Kelce's going to do it this year.
And I'm looking forward to that discussion as we get closer to just see where he falls for you, where that strategy looks like. As far as drafting him, because man, you have to pay up for him, but the man was on fire last year. We somehow managed an hour-long tight end talk. This was a lot of fun. We've touched on some cool topics. Well, you beforehand too.
You were here for an hour. I was here for like 59 minutes and 30 seconds.
That's true. We'll deduct that from your paycheck. We'll be back next week to talk quarterback strategy. We'll mix it in. We'll talk 1 QB. We'll talk super flex. We know obviously for dynasty, super flex, it's got to be the way, but for redraft leagues, not as popular yet. We'll the movement's coming. We all know it, but we'll be talking about both of those things. I'll be on the War Zone this week with Memphis, so be tuned into the War Zone for that. If you're watching on YouTube, actually, it will be in 2.5 hours. So hang out if you want. Yeah, give Jake a follow on Twitter at JakeTakesFF. You can give me a follow at KyleMonth8. Subscribe, rate, and review the show if you like what you hear. If you don't like what you hear, what the hell are you still doing here? It's been an hour. See ya.